Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's title story, my HOA burned down my farm because I refused to join the homeowner association. Here is what happened. The first one starts like this. I don't really know where HOAs originated from, but I always thought of them as a very Western thing. For all I know, they were here in Asia the whole time, but just not as popular until recent history. Either way, they are here now and popping up all over my country. There is a lot of debate about if they are good or bad, but it really comes down to the individual. I will say that here, if you're not part of the HOA that formed, you will be seen by them as almost of a lesser person. I have a farm, and since it is not a typical home, I feel no need to be part of an HOA. I did read about it, and it highly caters towards the people living in normal homes and acting like the farmers don't even exist. I'd be giving them money for things that would not even apply to me, so it would literally just be throwing money away. Despite that, and even explaining it, I'm constantly talked down to and bothered to join the homeowner association. It got to the point that I requested a meeting with the head of the HOA just so I could explain why I did not want to join. I actually got it, and I was hoping my one and only meeting with him would clear things up. It didn't go my way from even the beginning of the conversation, and it just went down from there. HOA head: "So you're the one that thinks he's too good to join the HOA, huh?" Me: "I don't think I'm too good, I just don't think there's any point for a farmer to be a part of it." HOA head: "The HOA is good for everybody. It doesn't work if some people don't agree to help and do their part for the community." Me: "I want to help the community. I always want to help. I just don't want to be paying a monthly fee for something that I don't get any of the benefit for. If there were things in it that were geared towards the farmers, then I would consider it." HOA head: "I see. As a farmer, you're far too poor to be a member. Still, I think that we can come to an arrangement so you can still be of use to the community. You just have to sign this document and then we can all work together." I don't know if he expected me to be able to read or something, because no sane person would sign this. Also, me getting insulted and called poor because I'm a farmer just made me want to walk out of this room and never talk to anybody part of the HOA again. Going back to what the document said, it was obvious why it was not in the HOA rules, because it would never pass anybody looking it over. The first thing right at the top was that I would have to donate 30% of my total products to the HOA. That was a huge amount, and it didn't even specify why they wanted it. They continued demands, saying that any HOA member would be allowed to enter the farm and harvest fruit and veggies as they saw fit. Finally, the HOA wanted full control at any time to use my land to build any structure they deemed necessary for the neighborhood. You can be sure that I didn't sign that and instead told him off for trying to take advantage of me. That with these rules there wouldn't be a farm for me to run or a house for me to live in anymore. The HOA head got really angry when I did not want to sign it and started calling me all sorts of things, the most prominent being that I was poor and dumb, and promising that in the end he would get his demands one way or another. I went home and decided at that moment I was never gonna join this HOA, and anybody trying to get me to join would get a door slammed in their face. Turns out that what he told me was not just some big empty threat. One day when I left the farm for some time to drive a shipment a couple towns over, he decided he was gonna destroy my farm. He started a fire, and I don't think he wanted to wait and see if it spread. He actually started multiple fires all over the farm to make sure that not a single inch would be usable again. I only know this because when my farm was getting looked over later by experts, they said the burn patterns only made sense as multiple fires started. One clear sign that it was arson and not some accident. My farm was ruined, and I had no ability to raise animals or plant anything in that ground anymore. I had zero clue what I was gonna do, but that was when a neighbor came over and told me that their security tape caught some of the fire being started. I watched it and I couldn't believe that there he was, the HOA head, clear as day, starting the fires to my farm. I was given a copy of the tape, and with that went and started a lawsuit against the HOA for the damage they had done. That is why I had experts coming out and looking at my farm. They had to estimate what it was worth, so I knew how much to sue the HOA for. It turns out my entire land, not including the house that didn't get damaged at all, was worth around $600,000. Using that number, I sued them and waited until I could explain why I thought I deserved the money. Of course, he wasn't gonna admit that he did it and claimed I must have caused a freak accident and wanted somebody to blame. They talked about how the farmers in this area are all very uneducated and cannot even read. That I wanted to take their money because I made a mistake and was now desperate for something. I let him continue to talk his way into a corner before I was able to talk and present my evidence. I talked about the demands they wanted me to sign that I refused and then his threat. Also the reports from experts saying it was clearly arson because of how the fires were started. Finally, the video he didn't know I had showing him literally starting the fire on one of my fields. I had enough evidence to show that he did it and it was on behalf of the HOA. I won my money and the HOA head ended up going to jail for arson and for animal abuse, because sadly the fires also spread to the barn. With him now in jail and the HOA losing a huge amount of money, they found it in their best interest to disband the homeowner association. That was not part of my plan, but I'm not complaining about it. If it wasn't for my luck of that video, I probably would have ended up broke and not able to run a farm anymore. As it stood, my land was destroyed and I had to use that money in order to buy new land and basically start all over again. It was hard and something I never want to have to do again in my lifetime. And yeah, Ripe Stars, it's always so sad to see HOAs giving farmers a hard time. Farmers are some of the most important people in our society, and without them we would not be able to survive, at least in our civilization at the moment. Anyway, if you enjoy these HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment for the algorithm. Thank you so much. The next one is another revenge story. I'm currently in the town I grew up in working. This crap town is hundreds of miles away from my home. I've been here much longer than I expected and it's been more miserable of an experience than I could have anticipated. The house I'm at happens to be right next door to someone I grew up with and their spouse. J1 is my childhood acquaintance and J2 is the spouse. This melodrama kicked off 2 nights ago when I went to grab some tools out of my work truck. The truck is an F550 with an 8-panel utility box on it. It's a couple extra desserts shy of 10 tons gross weight. And my tools are how I make a living. I obtained a reference for quality tools early on because of their ability to provide. I rarely loan them out, but when I do, it's under expressed conditions. The truck has to sit in the driveway as it won't fit in the garage. The edge of the driveway is inches away from the property line shared with J1 and J2's house. They rent the house. I've known S, the landlord of said house, for my entire life. S and I have a very good relationship. Back to the tools though, I went out to grab something from one of the panels in the truck when I noticed a uniform extrusion of snow in the bed portion of the truck. I discovered that under the fresh snow was my open double-fold case of all of my priority sockets, wrenches, pliers, etc. The case itself I made as a project when I went to school for trade certification. The shell is aluminum, the inside is blow-molded plastic I made specifically for those tools. I had to make the one-off mold for the plastic. I pressed the hinges that I made from scratch. I hardened the cam of the locking mechanism myself. It was a final project for a class that received high praise from the instructor, who was a veteran machinist. By high praise I mean he gave a critical scowl while inspecting and finished with a grunt and "not bad." The case received a perfect score. It was not just a case open to the elements left out for anyone to grab, it was all of those bare tools buried in snow. I don't treat my tools like that. If someone treats their own tools like that, I judge them for it. Abuse of my tools virtually never happens because there's hardly ever an occasion where I'm not in control of them. But someone left my single most valuable piece of kit out to rust or walk off. That someone was certainly not me. A few nights ago though, J1 texted me asking if J2 could borrow a cordless drill. I said sure, so long as he put everything back when he was done and locked back up. He knew where the key was because I had grown to trust him over time. That came back to bite me, as it seems it always does. After discovering my tools in that state, I took them in to clean and lube everything and calmed a tiny bit when I discovered the damage was mostly superficial. The jury is still out on a pair of digital calipers. I was still fuming over the disrespect though. Yesterday I decided to do a complete inventory of the truck to figure out if anything was missing. It doesn't take more than a half hour since everything is indexed. There's a hook, clamp or holder of some kind to keep all of my tools. It's a significant initial investment of time that doesn't take too long to recoup. I shave minutes off of my work every day because I don't need to look for things. I know exactly where they are. Once I had my list of missing tools, I headed over to Jay's house, cordless driver, a few bits, 2 batteries, a pry bar, and a 4-foot spirit level. When Jay 2 answered the door, he was clearly drunk, which was standard for that time of night. He didn't know specifically what he still had, but promised me he would check in the morning. I informed him that given the state I discovered my tool case in, tomorrow morning was not good enough. He advised I quit being a little whiny witch about the matter, and he would get to it when he found time. My fury was only bubbling at a light simmer, so I gave him one last chance. I asked him explicitly if he was refusing to give my tools back. He instructed me to self-copulate and forcefully closed the door in my face. I could have let it go and just defuse over time and maybe get my tools back. But that's not something I'm capable of doing in a situation like that. I try to avoid confrontation because I don't back down until the other person loses. It can result in a net loss for me as well, but it becomes about extracting that pound of flesh. It's a character flaw for sure, but I'm aware of it and I do my best to mitigate it. Thankfully, this turned out to be far milder than I was prepared for. So the next stage of escalation was one I really wasn't looking forward to. Police. I was tangentially involved with several different law enforcement agencies, both privately and professionally, for almost 2 decades. My feeling about law enforcement started as a kind of ignorant reference which turned to fascination. But over time, through intimate dealings through several facets and several agencies, I developed a profound and righteous contempt for law enforcement. There are otherwise decent people involved to be sure, but as a whole, there's not a single class of people I hold in lower regard. And J2 required that I involve them. So I called the non-emergency number to dispatch an officer, reference theft. Now, I knew perfectly well the cop couldn't do anything because it was a civil issue, but I had 3 goals. Perhaps recover my property, and maybe J2 would become belligerent and earn himself a sleepover with the local drunks and petty criminals. But primarily, I wanted a call log to reference if I needed to file a small claim against the spouse of a family friend I've known for almost 40 years. The cop showed up within an hour and I gave him the rundown. He was sympathetic but explained what I already knew. He still made contact to try to resolve the situation. Kudos to him. J2 was doe-eyed at the appearance of a cop, but was ready to surrender the hostage tools. But J1 was the one that became belligerent, throwing the bits and level off of the deck. All the while chastising me for such a betrayal. It turns out J1's dad actually had my driver, batteries, etc., so they were not even around to be had. J1 informed me that I'd be lucky if they could be found after such a betrayal. I'll agree it was an a-hole move on my part, but I just wanted my pound of flesh. And my tools. The cop left and I went inside. Before bed last night I hatched my revenge. After a brief chat with S, landlord, I could hardly get to sleep. At about 5 this morning, I plugged in the truck heater. At about 6:30, I started the truck, let it fully warm up for about 15 minutes and then backed out of my driveway. I pulled around to the alley and into the J's driveway behind their vehicles. I dropped the bracing jacks on the truck and jacked up the axle on one side. I put jack stands under the raised side of the axle and used my pneumatic impact to remove both rear wheels on the raised side. I spun the impact until pressure was low enough the vanes wouldn't engage to spin and went back inside where it is warm. Freezing moisture prohibited me from running the air compressor in near 0 degrees Fahrenheit weather. So, pneumatics were now dead. Their driveway access is from the alley, mine is from the street. Their driveway terminates just past the front of my garage, right on the property line. There is just enough room for them to park side by side, but they are blocked in on 3 sides by most of my garage, their deck and their fence. And now the 4th side by my incapacitated work truck. At about 7:40 AM, I answered a furious pounding at my back door. Surprise, surprise, it was J2. He inquired what in the copulation my truck was doing in their driveway. He had to get to work. I informed him that I moved there for better access to the airline at the back of my garage, fed through the back window. But due to the cold, the frozen moisture prevented sufficient pressure to remount the wheels. He was visibly shaking from anger and informed me that I was effing with his livelihood. Curious, I replied, tools are my livelihood. At which point I repaid his forceful door closing with one of my own. I received a flurry of text and disparaging remarks from J1, peppered with a few vague threats. At just past 8, a cop car pulled in my driveway. Lo and behold, it was friendly officer XX12. The same cop dispatched last night, looking a bit rough around the edges from working a double shift. I stepped out to greet him. He looked at me, panned to the truck, back to me and asked, "What the hell is going on?" I informed him of my attempted maintenance on my truck, but unfavorable conditions prevented me from finishing. I told him if I'd had all of my tools, I probably could have finished without issue. Which of course earned me a withering look, all while J1 was haranguing us with her perception of the law and what exactly needs to happen through the kitchen window. I informed kindly Officer XX12 that I had the property owner's consent before attempting my labor. J1 opined, "It don't matter, she need to give us 24-hour notice. You need to blah blah blah." As it turns out, notice is only required 24 hours before entry of the domicile. No notice is required for external portions of the property. It just so happened that the tools I needed to finish were the tools J1's father still had in his possession. Officer XX12 inquired how far away they were and suggested J2 walk there to get everything if he wanted to make it to work at all today. J1 insisted the officer provide conveyance. He declined, stating again it was a civil issue. 50 minutes later, I had my tools back. I used the driver to run down all the lug nuts on the wheels, but of course used a bar for final torque. As it turns out, the tires were not leaking and pressure was within operating range. So maybe unmounting them was not entirely necessary. I put my tools away, moved my truck back and double-checked the surveillance cam on the driveway just in case. While typing this, J1 informed me that I now owe them dollars for J2's lost pay, he is salaried, and also some money for the speeding ticket he got going to work. I cannot find words for the amount of vengeful glee I am feeling right now. And yeah, Ripe stars, that revenge story was absolutely beautiful. And the next one is an Am I the Jerk story. My grandpa passed away a few months ago and I inherited a little over $4 million from his estate. I had no idea that he had that much money and was honestly not expecting to receive anything, as I assumed it would all go to my mom. After I got over the initial shock, I took the opportunity to finally quit my job, which I really hated. As I don't have any outstanding debt, I can easily live off of $40,000 a year. I'm pretty introverted and I'm more than happy to stay at home working on art, music and other interests and gaming. Ever since I inherited the money, my boyfriend has been pressuring me to cover all of the rent and utilities, about $1,200 a month, for our apartment and start putting money away into a joint savings fund. I'd be happy to do this if we were married, but we are not. We have only been dating for a year and a half and I would prefer to keep our finances separate. Despite not working anymore, I still pay my half of the rent every month and I've started paying for a housekeeper to come in and clean a few times a week. So our apartment is nearly always spotless and looks great. I told my boyfriend he is not entitled to my money and he said I was being selfish for expecting him to still contribute to the rent when I could easily afford to pay for the whole thing. And yeah, Ripe stars, let me know in the comments whether you think OP is the a-hole in this situation or not. Comment number 1, not the a-hole as you're not married. I would be very wary of marrying him, though at this stage if this is his instant reaction to your finances. Get some urgent legal advice on the precise law where you are regarding locking up your money into a trust with named beneficiaries, you and any future children, cohab agreements, common law marriage if it exists where you are, and anything else which a decent lawyer will know. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. Judgment aside, stop renting an apartment and buy a house. Yourself, not with a boyfriend. I know this is not a finance subreddit, but continuing to rent when you could buy property instead is a huge mistake. Also, you say you can live off of $40,000 a year, which I assume is you dividing the $4 million by 100 for a safety margin. If you were to invest your money instead and take the safe withdrawal standard of 4%, you're looking closer to $160,000 a year of passive income while preserving the $4 million investment.
And the next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for going to the HOA to force my neighbor to take her frog statuette down? Recently I, 35 female, my husband 34 male and my daughter female 6 started to walk because of the virus. We've been doing the same route every day, it is about 2 miles and there are not a lot of cars, so it is a really good route. Recently, one of our neighbors put up a frog statuette up for display outside their house. I find it really creepy, and so does my husband. My daughter hates it, she is absolutely terrified of it. Now she refuses to go on walks. Earlier today I went to the house to ask them to move the statuette so it is no longer on display. I knocked on the door and a middle-aged man, maybe 55, opened the door. I told him the situation. He seemed sympathetic, but he said that he and his wife really liked the display, so they won't be taking down that statuette. After that I talked to my next door neighbor. He is the vice president of the HOA, so I was wondering if he could force them to take the statuette down. He said that the frog statuette might be a violation of the HOA bylaws. He went to look at it and sure enough, it is. Now they are being forced to take down the statuette and are being fined for violating the bylaws. My husband says that I took it too far. I see it differently. The statuette is destroying the aesthetics of the neighborhood and is scaring the children. Am I the a-hole? And a user in the comments said, "You are the a-hole, it was just a statue. Explain to your kid not to be afraid of it." Can you post a picture too? I wanna see the nightmare frog. Edit, I saw the frog. OP, you are still very much the a-hole. That frog is not scary. Explain to your kid that they don't need to be afraid of it and move on. Running to the HOA over every problem is not a good way to handle issues. And the next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for calling the police on trespassers? My mom inherited a huge piece of land from her father. The land was originally acquired to be developed into a subdivision, but my grandfather liked the land, so he kept it for his family. While entered to become a land where all his kids and their kids would build homesteads on, when he died none of my mom's siblings really wanted it, so my mom was sold or just given their shares. I am living on my own but came to visit my mom because both my mom and I are people who have not been around people, and that wasn't the case with my siblings or other relatives. There are tons of trails on the property and I went to go walk with my dog and my mom's dog, both off leash. My mom had told me that she has occasionally thought she heard motorbikes, but she had never seen them, so she didn't know if they were on our property, and since she hasn't seen them, they didn't have anything to call the police about. While on one of the trails a motorbike zoomed past me, almost hitting my dog. I yelled at them but they didn't stop. After walking some more I heard what sounded like the guy coming back, so I got out my phone ready to take a picture of him. When he drove past he realized this, slowed down and asked what I was doing. I told him I was taking a picture to show the police who I was just about to call. He quickly sped off. I did call the police and they said they wouldn't be there for about 45 minutes to do an official report, which was okay because it would take me a while to walk back to the main house. By the way, any and all entrances to the property have clear signs that say it is private property, not to trespass. About 15 minutes later though, I was in a part of the trail that parallels a road and was near one of the back entrances we have. A truck was sitting at the entrance. It had a different dirt bike in the back of it. I couldn't tell if someone was in the truck, but I knew the truck did not belong to anyone that was supposed to be there, so I took a picture of the back license plate. A guy rolled down the window and asked if I was the same guy who said something to his buddy. I said yes and that the police were already in their way because this was private property and they were trespassing. The guy gave me the finger and drove off. When the police came, I explained to them that this was the first time seeing them. This was not the first time my mom thinks they have been on our lane. Officer basically told me I was wasting his time reporting such a minor thing, especially since it was Thanksgiving. He said that I should let people have their fun. I reminded him that this was private property and these people were trespassing. He shrugged and said, "Well, where do you expect people to ride their bikes around here when subdivisions are taking up all the land?" My mom and I want to report the officer, but I wanted to come here and see if I am being an a-hole in even calling the police on these people. And a user in the comments said, "Not the a-hole, they were trespassing and almost hit you. They didn't even have the decency to ask if they could ride their bikes on the property. Also, bikes tend to ruin trails, so they could be damaging your property." The cop was super unprofessional and I would report him to his supervisor. He had no business in telling you that. And someone else said, he probably knew them, happens a lot in rural towns. The cop likely didn't want to write up his buddies and was willing to try and bully OP into compliance. And guys, I would say this is a pretty easy one in regards to who is the a-hole here, but anyway, let us know in the comments what you think about this story. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.